The Sega Dreamcast.
Oh
Yes.
man. All right.
Stoking the flames of my
You want to talk about something that's ahead of its time.
Yeah.
18 of the best months in the history of American video games.
Absolutely.
It
100%.
burned so bright and died so quickly. We should talk about being ahead of its time.
I remember it was little things that really blew me away about it. Like the memory cards had like a little video game.
The VMUs, visual memory units.
You could play a little video game that looked kind of like one of those Tiger Electronic video games from way back in the day. But it was not its own console or handheld, it was the memory card.
It was literally the memory card.
I remember being like, what genius thought of this? Like it was, like I said, it was ahead of its time. Maybe to its detriment, though.
It had a modem.
Built
into it. It had a modem in it.
Yep.
There's you know what's going to be big, guys? Online gaming. The internet. And boy, they were right, and boy, they were a year too early.
And then just to go back to the VMU for a second too, in terms of design, so this is for people who don't have an idea of this. This is a memory card with a screen in it. This is a memory card in 1999 with a screen in it, a D-pad, and two buttons, an A and B button. And for instance, with Sonic Adventure, which was like the big launch title for the Dreamcast, you had your little chow, your little animal dudes that you can catch in the game, and then what you could do is you could upload those to your VMU. You could take the VMU. I was at NYU when the Dreamcast came out, and I would take a shuttle to class from 23rd Street. And I would sit there on that shuttle with my VMU playing the mini games on the VMU to level up my chow. And then at the end of the day, classes were over. I'd go throw it back in my Dreamcast, and there you go. My chow in game were leveled up and powered up by what I had done while I was on my way to class.
You're pretty much describing companion apps, which is
These are
15 years ahead of time. But the sucker, it was so compact and dense, and it had the 4 controller ports, and it felt great. It had just enough storage capacity with that proprietary format to the
GD-ROM.
The GD-ROM to put. But I think what you just can't miss with the sucker, Sega had poisoned the water so badly
with the Saturn,
with the Saturn and the 32X, and the end of the Genesis lifespan, and several other things. But they produced this incredible machine, and then the software library that came out with the American launch and following. There are 40 or 50 games in that library that are all worth going back to, that are still fun 15 years later.
My former coworkers who were big Dreamcast people would Virtua Tennis was like a religion unto itself.
Virtua Tennis,
Res, Ikaruga, Mars Matrix.
Mars Matrix is one of my favorite. Red Dog. I don't know if you ever played Red Dog. But Red Dog was super good. Fur Fighters.
Skies of Arcadia. Soul Calibur.
Soul Calibur, my heart and soul.
Launched on the marketing-friendly day of $99.99 for a price of $199.
Wow.
But you mentioned software, but remember, EA chose PlayStation. EA did not support the console, and that was a huge strike against it.
That was a huge strike against it. As was the ditch they had dug with the Saturn and the Genesis. But also one of the things that at least then I attributed very much to its kind of ailing is that it was on store shelves in the looming shadow of the coming PlayStation 2, which at that E3, at the E3 right before the Dreamcast launched, right as the Dreamcast was about to launch, which would be a full year ahead of the PS2, Sony went ahead and was like, that's when their whole Toy Story graphics campaign began, and the spearhead of that really was a concept video of Gran Turismo and how it would look on the PS2. And they showed what was completely pre-rendered nonsense of what they thought Gran Turismo would look like. And I remember that being the moment where people were just like, wow, why would I buy a Dreamcast when that's going to come in a year?
To be fair, the PlayStation 2 went on to eventually become one of the greatest consoles of all time, and certainly the best-selling of all time. But that first year on the PS2, those launch games were mostly pretty bad, and whereupon the Dreamcast had amazing games, but the PS2 did something else the Dreamcast didn't do, and that was DVDs.
Right?
And DVD, as much as anything else, that may have doomed the Dreamcast, both in Japan and America.
Final note on the Dreamcast, kind of a proto Xbox, because it ran on Windows CE in this case. Right. The Xbox didn't run on CE, but ran on Windows CE, and as you noted earlier, had the built-in modem, as the Xbox would have the built-in Ethernet jack. So go figure. And Peter Moore is a man who would be connected to both of those.
Yep.